Welcome back to another Stampede Blue Colts Cast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt Danely. We are live on YouTube as well tonight. Bringing on our man, Zach Hicks, on the Colts Cast tonight. Going to talk some of the Colts draft in general. We're going to talk a little more definitively about the Colts secondary and some of the draft picks that they've acquired through this recent draft, what that kind of does to the group itself, and much more. So, Zach, thanks for jumping on the show, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Just been a really fun draft and a very fun past week here.
What was your favorite? Who's your favorite draft pick first and foremost? I'm curious.
Oh, man, that's tough because I liked a couple of them, especially now that I'm starting to get into the film rooms on each of the guys.
Yeah,
So far, I would probably say Paris Campbell, just
yeah,
because, man, he's going to bring so much to the offense. And I think the way I summarized it in my film room, which dropped today on Stampede Blue, was, at the end of the day, he has the potential to be a guy like T.Y. Hilton. He has all the ability to be as good as T.Y. Hilton with his speed, his strength, his ability to stretch vertically. But at the worst, you're gonna still get like a higher upside, like a better version of Chester Rogers. At worst, you're gonna get a role player who can play special teams and catch those screen passes and stuff. So at his bare minimum, he's still gonna be a good player in this offense. So I'm really excited about that pick. I think he's just gonna be, high floor as well as high ceiling type of guy, and I really like what he brings to the offense, and I'm super excited about that pick.
yeah. Banogu was kind of one of those picks. Like, I didn't have him ranked very high in my edge class because I just didn't think he was a pure edge. I just didn't. But when Ballard said something about moving him to linebacker, I thought, now that's a smart move. Kind of having him at Sam a little bit, plus also using him on the edge. And then I thought, why didn't they just draft Winovich? And then I saw you tweeted that the other day. I'm like, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying right there. Why didn't Winovich get the pull on that? But I like Bonagoo. I just didn't see him as a top edge in the class. But in general, you saw the most recent with the next pick for the Colts, their episode 5 where they were in the war room.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
You
I
need
know
to
it just dropped. I haven't seen it yet. I have it queued up, and I'm gonna watch it probably right after we get off here.
Yeah, you need to watch that. And folks, if you guys are listening on YouTube or whatever, you guys need to check that out too pretty soon tonight because it's really, really good. Really interesting to see that they go through their first 4 picks and they are just absolutely freaking stoked about all 4 of them. And you can kind of see how it's playing out when you hear them talking about, several picks ahead, talking about Bonago or talking about Paris Campbell or talking about Okereke. They were talking about Okereke, even who was it when they were talking? I think it was that they were talking about Gary Green, the edge out of Mississippi State. They were talking about him, said, man, let's get him. We should have picked him a while ago. So that tells you that they thought about him as a 5th round pick and just they were able to get him in the 6th. And I think that was kind of the takeaway from the Colts draft in general. There were a lot of guys that they felt they got in premium spots. And when I say the premium spots, I mean premium in terms of they got them at a premium where they were drafted versus where they had them ranked on their board. So I think that the Colts are real happy with this class. I'm happy with this class. I like it. I think that they did really well navigating themselves through it, finding some extra, some extra value, I think, with a lot of these things. Plus, they just supplemented everything that is currently there on the defense so well, I thought. But just in general, I like what they did with the offense. I like that they added some depth at the offensive line. Hopefully it's real depth. Hopefully these guys can actually play and aren't just camp bodies. You never really know once you get guys in there. But I think the linebacking core is going to be stronger. I like what Paris Campbell brings to the wide receiver core. The line, like I said, the edge group is going to be fun, I think, especially when you add another pure pass rusher like Gary Green in there. And then you get, kind of the group of Tyquan Lewis and all the other guys and just the guys who have been there for a while, the guys who are there now. It just looks like the group is kind of starting to evolve a little bit. So I like the way this defense, heavy defensive draft, I think is pretty exciting for the Colts into the future. So let's just hope the offensive line holds up and everything else goes on. And honestly, let's just hope that Houston stays healthy because that's really the key to a lot of this. If Houston stays healthy, a lot of things are going to happen. A lot of things are going to grow organically for the Colts defensively, in my opinion. So it should be fun. But today, largely, we are here to talk about the secondary and what the Colts did in the secondary. Let's talk about it real quick. With the second round pick, number 34 overall, that the Colts was ultimately their very first pick of the draft. They drafted Rock Yassin, or Abdurrahman Yassin. That's his real name, folks. I didn't know that. I'm looking at it going, who the hell is that? It is Rock Yassin. So he's a 6-foot corner out of Temple. They ended up getting Kari Willis, safety out of Michigan State, with the 109th pick in the 4th round. Marvell Tell was actually a safety at USC, and they got him with the 5th round pick, number 144 overall. He's going to play corner. He's 6'2", 198. He's built like one of those premium corners that, the Seahawks started this kind of the cover 3 love on him. They talked about him a little bit in the press conference post draft, and they were talking about how much they liked him and what they thought about, his instincts and everything else. They talked about a lot of these guys, Yassin as well, talked about how he was a good man corner. He's going to need a little help in the zones, but they love his instincts. They love, his ability to drive on the ball and stuff like that. So let's talk about this secondary and kind of match it up with what the Colts currently have in the secondary. I mean, I think a lot of people have forgotten, Zach, about Jalen Collins. Okay.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that's sitting back there who, 6'1", 203, not a small guy. Just, fits the profile of what the Colts want. They really liked him last year. Of course, they've got Desir back, Nate Hairston. I'm going to say roster bubble right now for Nate Hairston, DJ Killings, Chris Milton, Kenny Moore, Quincy Wilson. They've got a nice setup right now at cornerback. Rock Yassin, Marvell Tell. What happens with this group, in your opinion, going forward? Now, I'm not necessarily saying make a decision on who's there, but how much better did this group get in general, in your opinion?
Yeah. So the biggest thing you got to look at, in my opinion, and it's kind of a question here that I can pose to you, is first week of last season, who were the bottom 3 corners on this roster? Can you name them? Are they even still around the facility? It was like Lindsey Pipkins. I can't even name the guys. They were guys who were cut. They were like no-name guys who were bottom of the roster guys. Now, going to this offseason, they have 4 guys that are solidly in that top 4, from Kenny Moore, Pierre Desir, Quincy Wilson, Rock Yassin. Those are your 4 guys who are going to get a lot of playing time. Then you have a special teams ace and Chris Milton coming back. Then you got your project corner and Marvell Tell. And then you got guys like Nate Hairston, Jalen Collins. You got a lot of guys fighting for roster spots.
Yeah, and DJ Killings.
Yeah, DJ Killings again. And that's exactly what Chris Ballard wanted in this draft. I know he's said a lot about adding speed, not as speed, but depth is huge. And we saw it last year. It was a big thing that I was hyping on last season as well when I was watching a lot of tape, was if a starter came out, let's say, if Darius Leonard came out, if Kenny Moore came out, if your good players came out, the guys coming in were not even somewhat up to par.
Right.
The Patriots game last year was a huge example of it. When they had so many guys injured, they had backup guys coming in, and they just were not even somewhat up to par. Guys like Sky Moore at linebacker, in the secondary, again, DJ Killings, Lindsey Pipkins, those guys were just not up to par at all. And, from this draft class, at every single position, there's going to be a fight for a roster spot. And the guys who make the roster are going to definitely earn their spot. And the cornerback position is a lot like that. So it's going to be a battle. I think there's 4 locks. I think it's from Kenny Moore, Pierre Desir, Quincy Wilson, and Rock Yassin. But those last 2 spots are up for grabs. Does Nate Hairston turn around this offseason? Does he come back to his form that he was in 2017? Yeah. Does Marvell Tell take that special teams ace role away from Chris Milton and also provide the upside to be a starting corner? And that kind of lessens the need to have Milton on the roster. Or if Tell struggles on special teams, Milton can still stay as a special teams guy, and Tell can be the project guy. There's a lot of ways this could go. Jalen Collins, if he comes back and he's a really good player again, you can't keep him off the roster. There's just so many ways this cornerback group can go. And it's so much better than where it was last year, beginning of last year, because they had a trade for Lindsey Pipkins late in the offseason last year just to have another body there. So I'm just really excited about what Chris Ballard did with this group.
Me too. And you look at the group last year, and this kind of includes the safety group as well, but One of the things that the Colts were really good about was not giving up big plays in the secondary, big pass plays. They were, man, I know I just looked at this not too long ago, top 5 in the league anyways, I think, maybe top 2 or 3. And it just seemed like that was their calling. They were allowing a pretty high percentage, I think over 70% completion rate as a secondary in terms of the passer efficiency from opposing quarterbacks. They weren't really they weren't breaking up a lot of passes. It didn't seem they were getting some timely interceptions and stuff like that. But how specifically do you think that the second or the corner class got better with what they did in the draft?
Yeah, so we'll start with their 34th pick or 34th overall pick in Rock Ya-Sin.
And you talked to all 3 of these guys, Tell,
Yeah,
Rock Ya-Sin, and Willis. So you talked to all 3 of these guys. So what was it? Before we get to how much better or how they got better specifically, tell me about these guys in general. What was your take on all 3 of them?
Yeah, so I did have the opportunity to speak to all 3 of these guys. Rock Ya-Sin, I only got a couple questions in down at the Senior Bowl because a lot of people were going for him, mainly because he was a cool name at that point, not really a big name in the draft. And a lot of people probably got requests from their followers to go talk to the guy named Rock. But I got a couple words in with him down at the Senior Bowl, and a very quiet, reserved guy, but you could tell he's a confident person. When people brought up man coverage, he talked about that as that really being his strength. And then I know one person that was around me asked him, like, what do you really see yourself doing best at the next level? And he's just brought up that press coverage. He knows he can be a good press corner. He has a wrestling background. So he's a fighter at the line of scrimmage. And another big thing that I like bringing up whenever I talk about him is, at Temple, you don't get a single digit. You don't just be given a single digit. You have to earn a single digit at Temple. If any of you guys don't know the tradition, Temple Tough, the 9 toughest players on the roster get the single digits. And, he comes in from 3 years at Presbyterian College, transfers into Temple, and earns that single digit in one offseason. To get that single digit, you have to be a fighter. You have to be one heck of a leader off the field, one heck of a player off the field, and you have to really work for it. So from everything I've heard from him when I talk to him, along with all that extra background right there, he's going to come in and fight for everything. He wasn't given anything. He was a Presbyterian college guy, and then he became an early 2nd round pick in the NFL. He's going to come in. He's going to learn. He got a little ways to go, but from just his tenacity and stuff on the field, and from when I talked to him, I was really a big fan of him.
I think these guys really all bring in what Ballard was saying about, you like guys who move up because of their confidence level. They know that they belong, so on and so forth. Did you get the sense from these guys as well that they all felt, and I don't think that it's a cockiness or anything like that. It really, what it turns out to be or what it turns into is just that these guys, they look and they act and they have that feel that they've been there before, even though they're coming out of school. And I think that that's a pretty important piece of character as well. Did you get the same gist from them?
Yeah, let me go to the other 2 guys here. It's perfect examples of that. Kari Willis was a guy who was a running back throughout high school. From what he told me, running back in high school, his senior year, had over 2,000 yards rushing, over 20 touchdowns rushing. Comes into Michigan State and has to convert to a safety because they didn't think he was talented enough to be a running back, apparently. But earned a captaincy after 2 years or after 3 years at the program. Does countless of community service work. And then when you actually talk to this guy, he's the most humbled, nicest person you'll talk to. He had a big speech at the Big Ten banquet last year about how athletes should be using their stance or who they are as athletes to reach out to the community and help the less fortunate. He's a really good guy, and he was actually a person before the draft. When I heard about all that stuff, I really identified as like, this is a Ballard guy. Even if he's not a Ballard guy on the field, he's going to be a Ballard guy off the field. And
Right.
He just carries himself like a professional. He's been carrying himself like that, his whole life. He grew up in a rough neighborhood. I don't know exactly where it was. I think it was around Michigan State area though. But he grew up in a rough neighborhood, and he really bettered himself and became a really good young man. So all that stuff from talking to him, you really learn a lot about this guy. And he was just a big face in the community. And then going to Marvell Tell, it's a little bit different. but kind of on the same wavelength there. He really wasn't productive his first 2 years at USC. He was a cornerback in high school, came to USC as a safety, didn't really buy in, didn't really I wouldn't say he didn't have the maturity, but like he just really wasn't producing. And then he really flipped the switch his junior year. He became a guy who would stay after practice and talk to coaches nonstop after practice. He would be in the film room all day. He'd be working on his craft all day, and he really matured and became a leader of that team. And those are the kind of guys that Chris Ballard, has really focused on. Both these guys were captains. Both these guys are guys who will stay after practice. They'll coach up the young guys, and they just carry themselves as true leaders. And in a league where everyone's an elite athlete, you're at worst, you're a 4.5, 4.6 athlete. Right. These guys are elite athletes. What separates these guys, though, is your confidence, how you carry yourself, how you work. And all these guys, I mean, say they reached on all these guys. The one thing that you can guarantee from pick 34 to pick 200, whatever it was, all these guys are going to come in. They're going to work their tails off, because that's exactly what Ballard has preached in getting these guys. So those three guys, though, in particular, from when I talked to them, I have no doubt in my mind they're going to come into that locker room and they're going to really push the what Ballard wants, and they're really going to work hard at it.
And that matters a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that plays a big role in it. One of the things, though, flat out, we know that they've got to have talent. And folks, we're going to take a quick break right here. And right after this break, we're actually going to get that answer from Zach in terms of how the Colts cornerback class, our cornerback room in general, got better with the draft picks. We'll be right back after this. All right, folks, we're back. Zach, talk to us about this cornerback class. How did they get better?
Yeah, so we'll start at the top here with Rocky Sin again. Overall, I didn't love his game. I didn't really see it from a footwork standpoint yet. I didn't really see any trait that really pushes him over the top. I don't see an elite athlete, obviously, because he didn't test like an elite athlete either at the combine. Mm-hmm. But again, the thing that he's really good at, and the one thing that the Colts actually surprisingly like doing a lot, is that press man coverage. And, everyone talks about the Colts being that zone team. They are a zone team. They run their zone defense. But guys like Pierre Desir last year, for instance, was at his best when he was in that press man. And the Colts kind of progressively play a little bit more press man later in the year. Even Quincy Wilson is probably a little bit better in that press man type than in the zone scheme. And I think that was actually a strength of Rocky Sin's too, which he's mentioned many times. I really like to see him in that press man. I think that that's a good starting point for him. So if he is the fourth corner or he's the starter opposite Pierre Desir, that he already has that trait very well. He does have to learn a little bit in zone. But again, the biggest strengths, again, press man and his tackling. His tackling is great. And that is one thing that Ballard has really preached with what he loves in his corners is tackling. Mm-hmm. So he's going to come in, he's going to compete. He's going to be good in that press man. He has to learn a little bit in zone, but he's going to compete for a day one starter for sure.
Right. Well, one of the things with those guys is when they come in, they've got to be able to be physical, and a guy that brings, in a heavy zone defense, a guy who brings press man skills is going to allow the team to be a little more diversified. They're going to be able to play some cover six where you're playing opposite coverages on opposite side of the field. There are some simple things that are going to be able to grow from having a guy that has multiple assets in terms of his skill in coverage. So I like the fact that they drafted a press man corner, and it's just not, that wouldn't necessarily probably have been somebody that we would say, okay, we would probably go to who's one of the best zone corners in this draft if we thought that the Colts were going to draft him that high, right? But you see what they're doing. Desir's there, like you said, he's got good press man skills. But, Linwood, he played some zone too. He played a lot of zone, actually.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really interesting, really fun to see what Ballard feels like. He can put two guys, he can put him and Yasin and Desir at opposite sides of the boundary, and you've got a press man scheme now. Now you've got a completely different look, and you've probably allowed one of the other guys to come into the box. You got Kenny Moore running the slot or whatever. You've got a hell of a good coverage group right there, just in general. So I think obviously I agree with you. I think that they got stronger. I think that they got more physical. You like to see Quincy Wilson being physical. It's just he's got like an awkward kind of physical to his game, when it comes to open field tackles and such. So let's move to the safety position right now. And with Kari Willis out of Michigan State, where did you have him kind of in your safety rankings? That's kind of been your baby.
Yeah. So initially I actually didn't even rank Kari Willis. Just because I didn't get around to his film by the time our draft guy got out, and he was kind of a late riser in the process. He really came. He kind of jumped up into that third, fourth, fifth round range as we approached the draft there. But the biggest thing I saw when I rewatched him and I kind of regrade him, he probably would have been close to a top 10 safety for me. Probably would have been around the 12th or 13th. Not a great athlete. He just still has a little bit of rawness to his game. He's not going to be a guy who can play over the top. He's not going to be a guy who can read the play in front of him perfectly. But where he really excels is he's good in man coverage, as in he can be really physical. I think he had a 22 or 23 bench reps at the combine, which was the most of the combine. So he can get physical. He's a strong player, and he likes to hit those tight ends a little bit. But the best thing I noticed about him is he's just a great tackler, a very solid tackler, very square tackler, and he does not shy away from physicality at all. And it was kind of something I was going to bring up about Rocky Sin there. When it comes to secondary guys, I love my secondary guys, from safeties to corners. I love watching safeties and corners. The two things you really can't, teach secondary guys, they either have it or they don't, is, the ability to be physical and ball skills too. That's true. But like the willingness to be physical is one thing you just cannot teach. You either have it or you don't. Yeah. And Rocky Sin and Kari Willis, they both have it. They're willing to hit guys. They're willing to come up. You can teach, a little bit in zone highs and stuff like that, and reading court. Like we saw Quincy Wilson last year, for instance. Like coming in, he was not great with his zone reads and his zone drops. And as we kind of saw him progress last year, towards the end of last year, he really got better at dropping in the zones and reading quarterbacks' eyes. So you can teach that stuff. But the willingness to be physical in the run game and the pass game, and really, compete with receivers and come downhill and hit running backs, you can't teach that. And Willis really has that. And that's the biggest thing that I came away with this film from is, he's not afraid to come up to the box and hit guys. And he'll go across the whole field and hit guys. And he's just a great tackler, a very consistent tackler, breaks down and he drives guys into the ground. And I think that's the biggest thing that Bauer was looking at, because Clayton Gathers is a good player. He comes downfield with a lot of aggression. He'll run into guys, but he's not the most consistent tackler. Where a guy like Willis, he's a very consistent tackler. He's safer. So that might be an easy way that Willis gets a little bit of playing time early in his career.
I'm trying to think of which analyst had Willis in his top 5 safeties. I can't remember which one.
I think it was Jonah Tools.
Was it? I think there was a couple, and I'm talking like larger network. I'm thinking maybe even Kuiper, or maybe it was McShay. I honestly don't remember who it was.
Might have been. I know Jonah had him as a late second rounder. So
yeah, and that's
early third, which is pretty good again for a guy who went early fourth.
Jonah knows his secondary. I mean, that's high praise from him. So
yeah, Jonah knows his stuff when it comes to secondary.
But look at the rest of the group here, and this is kind of fun. You're talking about Willis and his affinity to be powerful or to be physical, and kind of the different things you can do with him right now. Clayton Gathers, we're not excited about his draft or his pass coverage necessarily. Derek Kindred, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about him. Roland Milligan, kind of an average guy that's been on the team. George Odom, I think, is a guy, we talked to him. He's coming up, in my opinion, where he's going to stack on top of a couple of these guys who are depth right now. Add Willis into all that, and you really have a guy like Matthias Farley and Malik Hooker who are going to be relied upon safety-wise to be the coverage guys, I think, right now. So is that enough, in your opinion, or is the coverage still going to lack here? And how much pressure do you think this puts on Hooker to really kind of show those skills in year 3?
Yeah, no, it definitely does put a lot of pressure on him. I do actually think, just because you brought Odom up there, I do think that long-term they do have a vision of Odom being more of a move around free safety type, but he's more of a box guy right now. He likes to come downfield, but he has the athleticism to be that deep safety. But yeah, right now it does rely a lot on Hooker. I think Willis can be solid back there. I think that he's a very disciplined player, but from difference with Clayton Gathers, I don't think he's going to be a drastic improvement over Clayton Gathers in that area. So yeah, it does kind of rely a lot on Hooker again, and it's probably frustrating being him. It really is, because when teams don't test you deep, your stats aren't going to be great. You're not going to get big contract. You're not going to be a Pro Bowler. But the best thing about him is he's really bought into this system. You could tell he loves the ability. That they're not really giving up big plays. I even saw there was a game last year where somebody tweeted out. where he played, I think, 50 snaps and didn't log like a single stat.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't test him whatsoever. But that's just how the defense is. It doesn't rely on him being a guy who can go from hash to hash, from sideline to sideline, and make these marvelous plays anymore. He's a two deep safety, a guy who just stays on his side of the field, prevents deep plays, and he has to be consistent enough to come up and make tackles. And I think that's the biggest area he needs to improve on is being able to come up and make those tackles consistently.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure on him making those plays. If the ball is near him, we all expect him to make that play because he was that high draft pick. He is that coverage guy on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure on him.
He's got to break up those passes. He's got to do something in the regard of that. But the fact that they didn't test him is a bit of a tip of the hat to him, anyhow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see that he didn't have major stats, didn't have a ton of interceptions, didn't have a ton of batted balls, but he was good enough and he played a ton. And there wasn't those passes over the top very often. So, they have gotten beat, obviously, with a few of them. But in general, I think, like I said, I think you still got to tip your hat to him for being back there. If they wanted to test him, they would. Teams really try to make a concerted effort not to test him because they know when you're dealing with a guy who's a hash to hash safety, like you've talked, and you're only making him play half the field now in this new defense, man, you've got to figure that the reaction and the ability to be productive is going to increase. So when they do, and I still feel like that Matthias Farley is one of the most underrated guys in this group, not only in this group, maybe the division, maybe in the AFC in terms of safety. Matthias Farley might be the best damn third safety in the league. I mean, when you look at teams and depth in general, if Matthias Farley is number 3 in this safety group, maybe he's number 2, whatever it is. He's a physical guy. We've seen him be able to make plays on the ball. A couple years ago, he had 4 or 5 interceptions. He's a guy who dislodges, is constantly getting the ball on the ground. I love Matthias Farley and the way he plays. Plus, they love his head. They love, how he can help develop not only guys younger than him at the same position, but the guys that are on the field with him currently, So I think right now you look at the safety group, and I think they're in pretty good hands. I felt this before the draft because there were so many people talking about taking Abrams here or just whoever, in the first or second round. And I just never thought that was really necessary when you've got a pretty good group right now. You got most of them under contract. You've got a first-round safety. You got a guy who's hurt, who played like a starter a couple years ago in Farley. You've got Odom coming up. Some of these other guys can fill in if necessary. You got some physical type guys. I just really felt like they were, I wouldn't say set, like they had the perfect tandem back there by any stretch, but I just really feel like they've got enough back there to where that wasn't a need. And now with the improvement of that linebacking core, the secondary in terms of the cornerback crew, I think these guys are going to be better this year. I think the coverage over the top is going to be better. I think they're going to gamble a little more, quite honestly. I think the Colts are going to gamble a little bit more, knowing that they've got Hooker who can play that single high. And they're going to look to bring some of that safety pressure like they tried with TJ Green, like they brought with Hairston 2 years ago, like they brought with Kenny Moore last year. I really feel like they're going to try to do that with their safeties this year a little bit more because I think they feel with the improvement of this cornerback group, with Pierre Desir climbing throughout the season last year, with Quincy Wilson even playing some slot snaps last year and growing a little bit towards on the boundary. And then you've got Kenny Moore, a guy you're in love with in general. I think that not you. I mean, the Colts.
I am.
You are. but the Colts are too. They love him too. And he's a guy who grew on me a lot last year. And I feel like they really feel like they've got something that's really close to being set, in my opinion, secondary wise, all the way around.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I'm thinking, and I know you were just giving high praise to Farley there, but in my opinion, he might be, he could be on the roster bubble. And I'm not saying it because of his ability at all. It's just, you got your 2 starters. You got Gathers and you got Hooker. And you got, a draft pick in Willis. You got George Odom, who they were really high on. And then you got a guy coming off an injury. I'm not saying that Farley doesn't have a talent-wise, but that's just a deep group right there. I think they'll keep 5 guys personally. But that's a really deep group. And it's so much better than last year where, in the playoffs last year, or halfway through the year, they had to sign Mike Mitchell. in the playoffs they had to sign who's that guy? He just signed with the Falcons.
He's terrible.
Yeah, he was the Cowboys guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, he was awful.
Yeah, but he just came in for one game and he actually played significant snaps.
Yeah,
And that's just how poor the depth was last year.
and he shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. That should never be a case. You should never have to sign a safety before a second round playoff game and play him significant snaps. That should never be something on the table. But
Right.
they were just hampered by injuries and they didn't have the depth last year.
Mm-hmm.
And now going into this next year, they could be cutting a guy in Derek Kindred, who is likely an outside shot to make the roster.
Mm-hmm.
He played a majority of the snaps for a pretty good Browns defense last year. That's just how deep this safety group is. And then when you go to the cornerback group, they could be cutting a 2017 fifth round pick that played really well in his rookie year. They could be cutting a special teams ace. They could be cutting a good player in his passing, Jalen Collins. They could be cutting good players instead of cutting guys like I keep bringing his name up because he's the only one that comes to mind, but like Lindsey Pipkins, DJ Killings. Instead of cutting guys who wouldn't make any other roster, you're cutting guys who are probably, bottom of the roster type players for most teams, So I just think that that's such a good thought process that Ballard had going to this draft. All across the defense, they just got so much deeper and so much better. And it's gotten to the point now, instead of, there being one or two big shocking cuts next year, or it was only John Simon that we were all freaking out about, or
Right.
Ryan Delaire last year, who didn't even make another roster. Last year, we were all freaking about cutting him.
That's crazy. I forgot all about Delaire, man.
Now
he was killing it.
Yeah, and then this next year, we're going to be cutting guys, like Al-Qaeda Muhammad if he doesn't make the roster. And he played a significant amount of snaps last year, and he was a good player when he played.
Played well.
Yeah. They could cut Zaire Franklin, a 7th round pick, who, again, good special teamer last year, who played well. There's a lot of depth on this defense now, and they could be cutting players who were middle of the roster players last year for us. It could be off the roster this next year, and it's just so much depth, and that was a huge emphasis, and I'm really glad that that's the route they took in this draft.
Me too. I think that, I think Ballard just did such a good job of, like you said, it's kind of like churning the roster and like literally churning the roster. Like, you're bringing these guys in last year, like you said, Zaire Franklin could be on the roster, but was a 7th round pick last year who played some significant snaps. You've got Matthew Adams in that linebacking core too. So, you've got so many different pieces in there. You've got the competition we've already talked about in the secondary, and all these guys, like you said, they were bottom of the roster, but solid depth, or, they were okay depth or whatever in a couple different places. Now, these guys may be off the roster because the depth got that much better.
Yeah.
And that means that goes a long way towards building a team. That goes a long way towards building that chemistry. I really like, a lot of what the Colts have done, and Chris Ballard in particular, obviously. But, man, and I've said this before on the show, I'm sure of it, but you just can't beat the chemistry between Reich and Ballard right now. Those two guys are in lockstep.
Yes.
And there is nothing more beautiful than that after the crap show we saw between Pagano and Grigson for too damn long. This is something that I don't know how often this is actually the case. You see guys, GM, head coach, talk a lot, act like they are on the same page. But we saw that too with Pagano and Grigson. No matter what we thought of them two, they acted like they were on the same page. These two are genuinely and it's just not a better phrase for it. These two are just in love with each other in the way each other thinks about football. You know what I'm saying?
They're football guys.
They are, and they love it, and they like ass kickers, and they bring them in, and they do this, and they really know what they're doing. That whole scouting department there, man, it's just so impressive to see that. And you know who else? Ed Dodds. You see at the end of a little bit of a spoiler here, but at the end of that this last episode of On the Clock on the Colts.com, you see Frank Reich and Chris Ballard just talking Ed Dodds up in terms of the undrafted free agent pool, how he manipulated all of that and the different scouts into getting the guys who they had on their board and all that. And they just Ed Dodds is going to be a GM in this league in a year or two. He's not going to be with the Colts much longer because of his success and because of how good he is. And there's a lot of what you see with him in terms of how he and Reich and Ballard kind of move. These guys, I mean, this is it is really just a three-headed monster there with that, and you love to see all of them feeling like they're successful because of the same people. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I got my guy, he got his guy. No, we got our guys, all of our guys, we got them all. And that's just something that's so cool to watch.
Yeah. And I will say, going to a personnel standpoint again, my favorite thing that Ballard did when he came to this team, his biggest thing, he looked at a roster that was not only devoid of talent, but was slow, slow. So slow. I mean, long gone are the days of Antonio Morrison and DeQuell Jackson and all these guys on defense that are just slow. Who's the slowest guy on this defense now? You got athletes everywhere. Like let's look at the linebacker core. Who would you say is the slowest linebacker on this team? Anthony Walker? Like
Maybe.
Anthony Walker's fast.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean. Like it's a fast group, and they play fast. It's not just they time fast and they're slow players. They play downhill and fast, and I just love it. From defensive end to defensive tackle to linebacker to safety. I mean, all over that defense is just speed. And then on offense, adding guys like Paris Campbell, Naeem Hines, just so fast. He made this roster. He took a roster that was stuck in the 90s. Was stuck in forever. They were signing guys like Andre Johnson and, guys who were good in the early 2000s and late 90s, like all these old players that were just slow and just way past their prime. And he took it and he made it a young, fast, aggressive team. And again, it goes both to Frank Reich and Chris Ballard, but it's just amazing. It's only been 2.5 years, almost. We're going into year 3, and he turned a slow, behind the times roster into an upcoming, fast, young, aggressive, hungry team full of team captains and charitable guys and honor roll students. I mean, it's amazing. And just 3 draft classes, he's kind of made this roster from a laughing stock that couldn't protect Andrew Luck to just a really good team, and it's impressive to watch. And the With the Next Pick series has really highlighted that, and I completely agree with what you said about Dodds. I mean, there is no chance. I don't even know if he'll last until the season starts, because a lot of teams like to change their front office a little bit after the draft. He might be a GM before this next season even starts. He's an upcoming guy, and he's gonna be a star GM in this league. But yeah, just all around, just from the scouting department to the GM to the coaching, they've really turned this roster around. And I didn't grow up a Colts fan. I cover the Colts now. I didn't really grow up a Colts fan. I started watching the last couple of years. It's definitely a really refreshing seeing a team do this, because you rarely see this in the NFL, where a team can kind of make this complete turnaround. And a lot of it goes to Ballard and Reich for sure.
Absolutely. So before we get out of here real quick, it got me thinking, you were talking about slow guys. Let's talk about kind of the trading of Hassan Ridgeway. So defensive end, basically the beef of the Colts defensive end group is Jabal Sheard in terms of build, weight, size. You look at the defensive tackles, you've got Marcus Hunt closing in on 300. Grover Stewart right now, 333 is far and away the heaviest guy in the middle there. And used to be Ridgeway was kind of right behind him in the 320, 325 area, I think. But Jihad Ward at 290 is the next best thing. So those are your 3 beef guys along the interior defensive line. Is this going to hurt them at all? Or, I mean, because they don't have enough beef, or is this enough beef in terms of trading off what they have for size with speed?
Yeah, so I will say, this defense that they run, the way that they run this defense, if you want to see another team that does it almost the exact same way as the Cowboys, Matt Eberflus coming from the same type of system there. It's not really about eating up blocks on the defensive line. It's about getting as many guys as you can into that backfield at once, and having that running back have to make either a split-second decision or just kind of go down and get what he can. It's all about havoc. It's all about coming downhill fast. And that's why you see a guy like Marcus Hunt, traditionally defensive end, you have a 300-pound guy who is an uber athlete, 4'6" speed, 300-pound guy who was a former discus champion, when he was younger. All you tell him to do is shoot up field and get in the backfield. And we saw it last year. He split double teams. He runs through guys. They don't need that beef up front. They honestly believe they don't need that beef. Now they'll have guys like Grover Stewart on the roster. And they could also bring back Al Woods, or they could also bring in a guy like Danny Shelton if they really want that size up front. But they don't really want those guys playing that much, maybe on short yardage downs. But for the most part, on their base defense, they want guys who are going to explode into that backfield, and the guys who are going to cause penetration. And their philosophy is, it's better to have 4 defensive linemen that can all penetrate and get in the backfield and get in front of that running back than have, maybe 4 guys that can eat up space for your linebackers. You want it to be not only your linebackers making tackles for losses, but also your defensive linemen. Get everyone in that backfield, cause havoc. So overall, obviously from a team building standpoint, I can understand why someone would look at this and say, like, they're going to get pushed around a little bit, but their overall scheme just emphasizes guys getting into the backfield and getting there fast. And honestly, a little bit of a side note here, but Marcus Hunt's not going to get pushed around by anybody.
Right.
He might only be 300 pounds, but he could probably, deadlift every single player on the roster right now. He's a strong man. So he might be 33 pounds less than Grover Stewart, but I'm sure he can hold blocks even better than him up front. But yeah, it's all about that penetration, getting into the backfield and causing havoc. And the Colts did a great job with that last year.
Yeah, Marcus Hunt's in good shape. I'm not too worried about him. But a lot of what they, and it's not speed so much from the defensive line, even though they want that. It's the explosion, the initial explosion, the initial ability to get slippery and get between blockers. I like that they're cutting down the beef, but it almost is like you've still got to have that extra guy there. And I thought that was kind of what Hassan Ridgeway was. It's not a big loss in terms of talent overall, in my opinion. I thought he was pretty good. But it's just a matter of, to me, do they really use Marcus Hunt? I mean, on interior, you're going to try and use him as a 3 tech. They're going to occasionally use him over the 1 or what? I'm just curious more than anything. I'm just curious to see how they rule this out, because Tyquan Lewis is obviously going to play more interior this year than edge, although I think he's perfectly suited to take over the edge. The left defensive end, as Jabal Sheard exits the team within the next year or 2 or whatever it is. But I just think that they've got a really impressive bunch. So tonight we got through the corners and safeties, talked a little bit about the rest of the defense. Next time, we're probably going to talk linebackers, defensive line a little bit more in depth about this class. Talk about a little bit of everything, because the Colts really kind of did exactly what they wanted to do in this draft. They had 10 picks. They focused on defense. They got better. They gave each of these positions legitimate depth, I think. And I think that they gave not only Andrew Luck another weapon in Paris Campbell, but I think they gave Frank Reich another weapon in Paris Campbell, where you've got a larger version of a guy like Nyheim Hines who can do just about anything, who can take the sweeps, who can run the routes, who can become a yak guy, who can hit out the boundary. He's got a lot of assets to him that Frank Reich's really going to want to use. So this was a fun class. I'm really excited about it. Zach, we're going to talk about more of these guys here in the coming days.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And yeah, going just quickly on your point there about Paris Campbell, if you guys want to check out my latest film room on him, it did drop this morning. And the kind of the wrinkle I've been adding to the film rooms with these draft picks is, I go over their strengths, but instead of going over their weaknesses, I'm going over, how they really fit the Colts offense, and even adding plays from the Colts past season. Like with Paris Campbell, adding a reverse play from Zach Pascal, and then adding a successful reverse that Paris Campbell ran in college, just to kind of show how they can use that here in the pros. So if you guys want to see almost exactly what Matt was talking about there, check out that article there. But yeah, I'm really excited about Paris Campbell too. That's going to be very fun. But I'm excited about this whole draft class in general. I think they're going to use these guys in ways that really maximize their abilities.
I agree, most definitely. And yes, make sure you guys are getting to see Zach's work. It's been excellent. It's been phenomenal throughout the entire draft season. Not just a plug, honestly. Go out. If you've ever read his stuff before, you already know you already know why I'm telling you this. It's good stuff. So make sure you guys are doing that. Make sure you guys are getting on iTunes, hooking us up with a rating and review, all that good stuff. Get to Stampede Blue for all your Indianapolis Colts news and articles and everything that you want Indianapolis Colts. Stephen Holder had a nice podcast the other night. It was really good, talking about Ballard's philosophy in terms of acquiring new picks, going and using the comp pick system to his benefit as well. Really interesting stuff. Stephen does an excellent job kind of laying this stuff out for us. So, I mean, make sure you guys are checking his show out too. But more or less, thank you guys for joining us on YouTube. thank you guys for continuing to come back to the podcast. Zach, thank you for being on the show, my man. Always great knowledge and insight from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Anytime. I love talking about this team. Just a very fun team. I mean, even if I wasn't writing for them, I would love to talk about them just because, again, just very fun and seeing exactly how they're building this roster.
It is interesting, and we're going to talk a lot more about it here in the offseason as time rolls on, and this stretch between now and training camp seems to last forever. So,
yeah.
Thank you guys for coming back. We're going to have a couple more shows up for you this week. Kind of depends on the other podcasts and kind of when they release and so on and so forth. But we'll make sure we get plenty for your ears out here in the next few days. So, thank you guys all for listening. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Colts Cast.